my first stream of 2017, I believe. My first stream on my own channel. This is Babylonian Hebrew. So I'm just testing out a new type of streaming because I don't have my laptop with me right now. Unfortunately, I have to stream from this YouTube gaming application, and it's pretty annoying, but I managed to get around most of the annoying parts about it, like the fact that it necessitates you playing a silly mobile video game while you're filming. So I was able to get this nice slideshow. Let me give props to whoever made it first before I get into the video. The slideshow is titled Classical Ottoman Music, and the uploader is Omer Hanks, Omerhanx. You can find his video on YouTube. So, a lot's changed since I've left, or during the time that I was gone. I was living in a few places. I was living I was staying rather for a period of time in the Middle East. Then I was in the Pacific Northwest of the United States of America, and then now I'm on the west coast of the United States of America, the California, San Francisco Bay Area, and soon I will be going to New York, London, Israel, and a few other places again. I'm basically just here for work. Apparently I should turn up my mic. Is this any better? Yeah. So I've just mostly been busy with work, aside from some family issues, which have kept me quite busy lately, but I'm pretty much back now. I'm going to be making videos and podcasts and doing a fair amount of writing as well, if all goes as planned in the near future. So, let's see, 2017. What is 2017? Alright, no, that's not a pleasant noise. Alright, that's a bit better. Turn off the music? Okay. Yeah, I can turn off the music. But then it has this this picture of dancing Sufis. Here, let me change it. Don't want to culturally appropriate. Alright. Okay, the shit music is off. Here, we have a nice photo of tulips. This looks a bit better. Anyway, as far as audio goes, this should have solved most of the audio problems. Anyway, let's dive right into it. 2017, what's been going on? In the United States of America, Trump is president. In the UK, Britain has Brexited. These are all phenomena that had happened about a year ago or so, but effectively we're just seeing the repercussions of it right now, and I think it's a bit too soon to make a judgment about either of those things. At the request of Krakenata, whose profile picture is a screaming cat, the music has been turned down, and so I won't really be commenting much on those two political, Western political sort of Western political unfoldings. But let's see what else has been going on. In terms of my own personal circle, Cater Endless, who appeared in several of my videos, has now gone on to make a website called the Logos Club, which I highly recommend all of you visit. I'll put a link in the not the comment section below. I'll put a link in the video description below once I've uploaded this, and I highly recommend you check that out. He's working with people such as Survive the Jive and Giovanni Penichetti. Giovanni Penichetti you might recognize from West Coast Reactionaries, the West Coast Reactionaries blog, and it's a scream. You might, and Mr. Survive the Jive just runs an absolutely excellent YouTube channel, very educational. I highly recommend you check it out, and he's been featured several times on the Plebeian podcast as well as several other pieces of content by YouTubers ranging from perennialists like Adam Wallace to vloggers like Millennial Woes. I'm not sure what to classify him as quite these days. I have to catch up with a fair amount of his videos, because it was actually him in part who gave me a fair amount of inspiration to start this channel. And it's interesting because him and I, politically speaking, are probably coming at things from very different perspectives. But it was just the manner in which he he would make sort of vlogs just expressing his opinions in a fairly like personal manner. I just found very appealing, and that's one of the things that led me to make YouTube videos. So I would love some questions from the audience, however small it is right now. I'm not sure, but I can't quite see the comments, but they only pop up for a second. But if you say something, I'll be able to see you and see your name. And so if there's anything that anyone would like to say, go for it. But let's see what's been going on. The whole I think that what's funny is the whole skeptic thing. The whole skeptic thing is basically there was a period of sort of this tidal wave of so many channels that are like, oh, skeptic, oh, like feminist destroyed by logic type crap, just these really like low-hanging fruit, ridiculous nonsense videos that sort of inundated the internet for a period, like things like I don't know, crap like they would be called like SJW cringe compilation or something like that, and these videos completely inundated the internet or inundated YouTube rather, but also, I mean, you would see content like this in a lot of places, and it was just this very it was this very easy it was an incredibly easy target. And I mean, the fact that it was an easy target was apparent to some prior to the fact. Like, I know that now known as the alternative hypothesis, Ryan Falk made a video on this saying, this is clearly low-hanging fruit. These, making videos like this is they're almost perfectly designed to appeal to most people's sensibilities, whilst simultaneously maintaining this facade of edginess or irreverence, when in reality the people you're going after are people that most people actually kind of mock and deride, and you're not making any sort of unsaid point here. You're not speaking truth to power, really. You're speaking truth to, if anything, at best, you're speaking truth to like the I guess one would say like the foot soldiers of power, but that's or the zealots, the acolytes, the followers. But sorry, just one moment. Here, I'll be able to actually pull up YouTube comments so I can respond to what everyone's saying on my second device here. Give me just 1 second. But yeah, exactly, and that's true. Like someone said in the comment section, it's very easy to monetize a video. Like, it's very easy to monetize a video. Like, oh, SJW's, wrecked by Milo at so-and-so diversity, or like compilation of, social justice or feminist cringe or things like that. And I think it appeals to a lot of people broadly, I think, the world over, because, I think there's also the majority of the world I would say the majority of people in the world don't live in countries where that is the norm, even, so they can just sort of laugh at it in a sort of mocking sense without even being subjected to the consequences of such, the social consequences of whatever, regardless of the things that. Yeah, this comment perfectly illustrates what I'm talking about. Imagine the type of person whose primary means of income is Ben Shapiro Thug Life compilations, and not just that. Imagine the type of people who actually enjoy watching that sort of. I wonder about it. The people who are still neocons ironically and unquestionably, and the people who are still like those sort of conservative type people, I guess, shall we say, like those very basic, I guess, like post-Reaganite conservatives. I don't even know what to call them. I'm not incredibly familiar with American political history, so I'm not going to act like I'm speaking from tremendous knowledge on this. But Prager people, for instance, Dennis Prager is still making content, and you look at his videos, and it's clear. Okay, a lot of these videos are literally just, and if you look at the description of the videos, it's true. The videos are literally just things that are paid for by large petrol and oil foundations in order to basically like it's shilling for large corporations. It's shilling for and in the most crude and in a way that I really disapprove of. Like a lot of these oil companies, or not even oil companies necessarily, but a lot of the things that the viewpoints that they do shill for are, let's say, anti-environmentalist. I don't think that is truly a conservative, regardless of what conservative means. Some say there is no conservative, but it's not a right wing in the sense of right. I shan't even use that term. I'll say it's not a traditional or reactionary perspective, even in the slightest. It's not conservative in the literal sense, in the sense of conserving, because it's destroying what is passed down, within nature, from God, regardless of whatever perspective you want to take on it. There's nothing conservative really about supporting deforestation and destruction of the planet necessarily, and that's not, and ignoring the whole climate change thing, the whole climate change situation and debate, which really confuses me, and I really can't be too bothered worrying about it, frankly, because even if it was the case, what to do about it would not begin in the homes of sort of upper middle class people in Western countries. It would begin by countries like India and China not having exponentially large amounts of coal-fired power stations and things of that ilk being produced every single day. So, but regardless, I can't stand a lot of aspects of things like Prager University, and I feel like someone like Dennis Prager really should know better, but he just shills for these corporations to the point that they betray his values. And also those, it's just so, people who are still libertarians as well, those who are still very hardcore libertarians in America, I can't understand those people, and I can't understand the conservative types, the Ben Shapiro thug life. I listen to Ben Shapiro, and it's just, it's like Constitution. Maybe I'm not American enough, which may very well be the case, but what is the appeal of the Constitution? I mean, it's really just a document. I mean, maybe it's not an entire nation based on and some people say, it's not based on a principle. America was a nation with this people's history. Yeah, to some degree that is true, but unlike, shall we say, Australia or New Zealand or Canada or any of the other colonial countries, Pitcairn Island, America was not based off of America wasn't a colonial country per se. It was this country that rebelled and then took on this identity of, and you could say, yes, the ideals that, the post-Enlightenment ideals that caused America to come into existence are very, Anglo ideals, or some would say broad Northwest European, small, more specifically Anglo ideals that brought these tendencies towards individualism, etc., that brought the American situation into existence. But at the same time, I would say, also, there is no hope in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, there was no hope of avoiding what currently happened with America. If anything went wrong, America sort of would have become this... the mercantilist nature, even, that you see in a lot of the colonialists that came to America, the fact that America was colonized by companies to a large degree as well, and a lot of the people who came here were purely seeking profit. I just feel like it was sort of a doomed voyage in a lot of ways. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, by the way. All right, so I'm now going to begin to read some comments. Give me just a moment, please. I can put some music back on. Alright. Let's check out some comments. No, the stream will not be taken down. None of the other streams were meant to be taken down, rather. That was all that was all just YouTube being glitchy and annoying and very not user friendly, to be quite honest. I mean, it's user friendly to people who want to go through the trouble of, setting up a game recording software and an encoder. It caters to the PewDiePies of this world, to be perfectly honest. And the more amateurish, even less entertaining, by actually a fairly large margin, that's saying something, YouTubers who simply like to plaster their face on, say, the upper right hand or lower left hand corner of them, playing some silly video game. Like, really? That's what you spend your time doing? And you wish to make a living out of that? I mean, what would you tell your prospective future, wife, or in some instances even husband, when you meet them? And I'm not talking about gays, I'm talking about women. And or what would you tell your parents that you do? Like, let's say you made it big off of that. I wouldn't be able to look my family in the face when I came home for the holidays, to be perfectly honest. Maybe that's a bit harsh. So, hello everyone in the comment section. Ordracon, Vex, oh my gosh, it's good to see you. Nadem, Neutral Observer, Tommy Pickles, Kosciuszko, something Slavic. Central Slavic, perhaps? Or like West Slavic? I don't know. It's something Slavic. Prineon, Krakenata, and Tommy. Everyone who's watching my channel, good to see you. And everyone who wishes to get in touch with me, please add me on Discord. My Discord can be found. It's I'm not sure what my Discord is, actually. Hold on just one moment. I can go check that. But and in the meantime, while I check that, I'm going to play some music. Yeah, it's Polish, so it's something West Slavic. I was correct about that. Alright, so my Discord is ed number, and then there's 4 digits, ed number something or other. Ed number, one moment. It's Ottoman court music, I believe. I know, right? I'm sorry. That's pretty degenerate. It's for a lot of the people watching. But, it's only fair. I mean, what else should I be playing? Anyway, if there are any questions for people in the comment section, anyone who have any specific questions, like where I am currently right now in California is very interesting. If anyone's been to the Silicon Valley region, Cupertino, it's not quite like anything else. Yeah, I feel like California is it's just a very interesting part of America. I think that it's certainly worth a visit because it is very much its own thing. Whether one likes it or not is entirely subjective. I find that I'm astonished by Silicon Valley. Sorry, not Silicon Valley. San Francisco. I'm astonished by San Francisco because, yeah. Someone says Turks are shit-tier imperialists. Even Anglos aren't as horrible in that regard. And I would agree that Turks are not... I mean... No, because they never even really fully fleshed out a system or an ethic for imperialism. They, in fact, took on someone else's motivation for imperialism, practically, as it were. They were just sort of a force that needed to be given a direction. In a way, they didn't have really much to their system beyond that. I think that the most interesting parts of the Ottoman Empire are not necessarily the Turkish parts. I think the most interesting parts of the Ottoman Empire is what happened in Southeast Europe, in the Arab lands and Jewish lands in the Middle East and North Africa, and the Assyrian regions. See what happened there. I think it's just quite interesting. At one point, the Ottoman Empire even ruled over East Africa. I think that there's a lot of history there that's pretty... No, it's not that well talked about, and I think that a lot of the driving force behind the Ottoman Empire, like for instance, at certain points, nearly all of the navy was North African, Greek, etc., not Turkish. So, Yeah, the Turkish served in certain, roles. They acted in certain, administrative roles and governmental roles often. But yeah. Sorry, just one moment. I need to get my Discord name. Yes, it's Ed number 7043. Ed number 7043. Yeah, that's Ed, ED, lowercase, number 7043. So please add me on Discord. For some reason, my Skype account is not working. So if anyone's been trying to message me on Skype, do not message me on Skype. Message me on Discord instead. Or message me on Google Hangouts. My Google Hangouts name is Babylonian Hebrew. So, hold on. Yeah, that's a nice photo. So, let's see. Oh yeah, on the subject of people making money off of videos, people can make huge amounts of money off of certain types of YouTube videos. I hear that there was a large amount of demonetization, but at the same time, I also have seen data saying that, within 2017, it is possible to make, shall we say, thousands of dollars, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars per month, per year off of a YouTube channel. So that's interesting. And what I find odd is that as many views as a lot of these things like Ben Shapiro, Milo, Thug Life compilation videos garner, many views. Or a video of Ethan from H3H3 walking around with a giant e-cigarette, things like that. They'll garner a million views, more than a million views in many instances, sometimes dozens of millions of views. But the thing that I find interesting is what he seems to garner even more views and even more money, because apparently they don't get demonetized, are these bizarre, it's an entire strange genre of videos that apparently has existed for 2 years, or maybe 2.5 years or something now, and I only just found out about recently, now that I've returned to the internet. Or return to YouTube, and that's the bizarre, sort of quote-unquote kids videos that are some disgusting sort of like Common Filth needs to do a video on this, to be quite frank. The sort of horrendous sort of fetishistic child targeting videos that are it looks like some bizarre brainwashing thing combined with computer algorithms combined with pedophilia, and it's the it's the sort of children's channel type thing. Anyone who knows what I'm talking about will know this. It's the Spider-Man and Elsa, Peppa Pig, whatever nonsense. But anyway, that stuff has completely taken over YouTube in the meantime. And apparently that makes a good dollar. Meanwhile, Millennial Woes is still needing to ask for alms on Patreon. Give me one moment. Unfortunately, I can't have other people onto my stream, or I would right now, because there are a lot of people in the comment section who I would love to join me. For instance, Neutral Observer asks, will I stream with Adam? And I say, yes, of course I will stream with Adam. I've been trying to get back in touch with him. I sent him multiple messages on YouTube, but since my Skype's disabled, I don't really have a way to reach him. But of course I will stream with Adam. Adam Wallace is I think he's going to go on to do even greater things. I just think, I don't know. I think that he's very, very, he's very, and it's not a question of smart or not smart. It's not a question of high IQ or low IQ. Does he watch Rick and Morty or not type intelligence. It's a question of, I think that there's a wisdom to him that you don't really find in a lot of people who are his age. So I think that that's a very good sign. Wherever he is now, I hope he's doing very well, and it would be nice if he got in touch with me as soon as possible. Let's see, what do people say in the comments? I want to earn money by uploading old Vine compilations. It's pretty degenerate, but a lot of people do that, fair enough. If that's a way to make a living in a 21st century, that's not, being some, some hospitality employee that's wage slave all day. Not saying that that's terrible, but, if that's the way to go to live a comfortable life, then yeah, upload those vines, my friend. Yeah. Someone said, according to Ambassador Morgenthau from the U.S., the Ottoman Empire was built by Greeks and Slavs, and the Turks just reaped the rewards. This is said by Kosciuszko, the Polish gentleman from before, and Imperial Aspiration says it wasn't Greeks or Slavs so much as Albanians. Now, I know of the Slavs. I know that there were a lot of Slavs who were slaves, there were a lot of Slavs who were slaves and a lot of Slavs who were impressed. When I say slaves, I really mean that they were effectively impressed. They were captured and forced into indentured servitude. Some of them were also South Slavs that were Islamic themselves, or Christian, and just simply fell under the jurisdiction of the Ottoman Empire, or were captured. It depends, but some of them just fell under the jurisdiction. I know that a lot of them served as, I know that a lot of the ones who were impressed served as, they served roles such as, what do you call it? Like aides to ambassadors, or let's say there was a pasha or some other governmental or royal figure. They would have a lot of Slavic or other impressed foreign peoples to serve as, let's say, tutors for their children, to teach them things like astronomy, mathematics, etc., etc. And I know of that. And I know that there were, let's say, a lot of Greek seafarers and navigators within the Ottoman Empire. And then Albanian, yeah, I know that there was also a large Albanian presence in the Ottoman Empire, but of course, that's to be expected here. The Ottoman Empire might as well have been the Albanian Empire. That may be a bit far. Turks at least pretended to be the inheritors of Rome, erroneous as it might be. Did they? And then Ordrakhan, hello Ordrakhan, says Spider-Man pees in Elsa's mouth. Yeah, those videos are horrendous, and they're everywhere. They're really everywhere. Like literally just type in Spider-Man, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I've heard a series of, I think it's a combination of multiple things overlapping. It's a combination of, sort of people with really bizarre, disgusting sort of fetishism that I don't quite understand, but it's very dark and highly unsettling to me. And sort of as Jonathan Haidt would profile me, I'm sort of one of those right-wingers with a high disgust reflex, and that triggers that disgust reflex strongly, and I want to cleanse the earth of people who would find anything in those videos remotely sexual, or really anything besides repugnant. But it's a combination of sort of YouTube algorithm, not algorithm, but it's a combination of people sort of testing things out on YouTube, sort of view farming, maybe trying to make money easily, and then there's also, I think, something to it. A lot of the comments are posted by automatic traffic generators on those videos, and a lot of I'm not sure exactly what to call it. There are a lot of those videos that are also live, which is very unsettling, which leads me to think that there's some sort of trafficking or other sinister element going on there. So I think it's an overlapping of several, and then there are some comments that are gibberish in other languages, and then there are some comments that when translated from other languages, read very clearly things like, "Oh, she's so beautiful, like send more photos," when it's a photo of like a young child or something horrific like that. So anyway, now that I'm back, I should do a video with Argent. Says Nights in Two Dreams, Nightmares, Two Dreams. Says now that I'm back, Nights in Two Dreams. Says now that I'm back, I should do a video with Argent. Absolutely, I would love to do a video with Argent. It'd be my pleasure. Western Man says Anatolia belongs to whites. I'm ambivalent towards the Turks, but they have Byzantine, yeah, for the reason alone that they must be hammered into far-flung reaches of the east. Anatolia belongs to the white. I mean, I'm not sure who the true inheritors of the Anatolians would be considered to this day. The whites is an awfully large group and unspecific. I think that Anatolia is. I think that the ancient Anatolians was inhabited by several groups. I know that there were Indo-European groups as well as other groups indigenous to the region. And I think that, and I know that the Turks. I mean, it's common knowledge. The Turks come from somewhere much further eastern, but the Eastern Turks merely there weren't enough of the Turks from Central Asia, or wherever they came from, the Altai Mountains, I think they would like to believe. Perhaps they did to some degree, but it was just sort of the Turk sort of. It was more of a cultural influence than anything. The actual like Turkish genetics merely settled down sort of over the region as like a light dusting, like a patina up on top of it. If you look at genetic studies, you'll see that Turks are only, like at most about half, central Turks from Turkey, that is, at most about half, sort of Central Asian to Northeast Asian, ancestrally. So, one moment. Yeah, Anatolia is a hotly contested piece of land, and I can't blame anyone because it had so many different cultures and so many histories fighting over it. But I think that one could say the same thing about the Levant, but of course I'm a bit biased there, shall we say. But let's see. Imperial Aspiration says Anatolia belongs to Greeks, not to whites. To Greeks, yeah, I mean, they had Byzantium, so I know that a portion of Anatolia was Greek for a period of time, then conquered by the Turks. The Hagia Sophia became what do you call it? It became the something. I can't remember the current name of it. The name of what it was turned into now. But yeah, hold on one moment. Let's see. I haven't seen a sign of Adam Wallace in almost a year now. I reckon he's doing fine. Yeah, I hope he is. Here. Earn money being a sticker merchant like Common Phil. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he really makes too much money off his stickers. I think he still has to work. I mean, that would be nice, but I don't think he's really the sticker merchant quite. Like, I would doubt that he makes more than $100 a month selling stickers. Maybe at most 1,000. You can buy a new iPhone. Yeah. The word slave comes from Slav, someone writes. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I see that claim being made quite often, but I believe it's erroneous, as I have heard other definitions, other reasons, and reasons for the origin of the term Slav, and those sounded a lot more logical and grounded to me than it coming from slave, because slave is an English word. Yeah, and I assume slave. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but Ataturk was a Slav. I don't know. People say Ataturk was everything, ranging from a Jew to an Arab to a Slav to a Central Asian to everything. 100% Central Asian Turk. Here, Turks aren't Semites. Yeah, of course, Turks aren't Semites. The people in Turkey are pretty mixed with the old inhabitants of that place. Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say that Turkey's a mix of many different things. And so when a Turk says, I descend from the ancient Greeks, or when a Turk says, I descend from the ancient Anatolians, or I descend from the ancient, Central Asian Turkic peoples, they're correct in saying all of those different things to a degree. A variant degree depending on the individual Turk in question. Yeah, someone said, I mean, Indo-European reclaim Anatolia for the Yamnaya. Yeah, all right, if you want to go do that. If you can pull that off, if the Yamnaya reclaims Anatolia, then I mean, I can't say I'll complain about it. It would certainly be interesting to see what happens. I'm not sure who the modern inheritors of the Yamnaya are today. That is probably the kind of thing where it's like, you can make guesses, but we probably don't have enough genetic data right now to work that one out. Let's see. I'll try to listen between bursts of the Dyson cleaner. What Dyson cleaner? Do I have a bad signal right now? My signal should be pretty good, actually. Like, there's an awful sound. Is my microphone bad right now? Tell me in the chat how my microphone is. Yeah, Slava means glory. That's what I've heard. Like, Slav means glory. We was Trojans. Someone said Anglos have a minimal genetic impact. Anglos have a minimal genetic impact upon England. It's at its highest in York, at about 80%. Other shires are far less, often below 20%. All right, so hold on one moment. I mean, I've heard that, and I've seen genetic studies of different types of DNA, say mtDNA, yDNA, etc., that being documented, and all of those things could have been, potentially all those things could have been potentially Anglo, as it were. And I mean, I think it's fairly easy to narrow down to several candidates that could have been that could be mutations that mark the Anglo influence. So I mean, like, someone might say, like, 20% is nothing, but 20% does make a difference. For instance, there are a lot of African Americans and Ashkenazi Jews who are 20% West African and Middle Eastern, respectively, and they still identify with and can often look quite like the latter groups, i.e., African Americans who are 20% still bearing fair resemblances to Africans, Ashkenazi Jews who are 20% Levantine, bearing in some ways fairly strong resemblances to modern Levantines, so or Mizrahi Jews or whatever population. But it's I don't know. It's I think that 20% isn't something that's completely insignificant, genetically speaking. 20% can still have a fair amount of influence, or 20% can be completely negligible and have no influence at all. It really depends on the specific instance. And there's a very interesting picture that I found that shows that a while ago. It was on. I know that it's kind of a meme site, but it was on that Euro, like Eupedia or something like that, and it showed the sort of genetic, the lay of the land, genetically speaking, in terms of Y-DNA, probably rather inaccurately, but it showed it in the different regions of the United Kingdom. If anyone can find that image, it's a pretty good one. To the degree to which it is accurate to the sources, I think that it's fairly interesting, sort of thing a fairly interesting way to see the way that different cultures settling in the United Kingdom had an impact upon the indigenous population, genetically speaking. Oftentimes the cultural impact is either far more prominent or far less prominent than the genetic impact. Like, it really depends on the instance. But in a lot of times it's far more prominent. For instance, I would say that Anglos. Anglos are a perfect example. But another example would be Turks. Yeah, Turks, as they were the conquering people. Indo-Europeans in some parts of southern India, in some parts of in some parts of Asia and in some parts of Europe. Indo-Europeans had not fully pervaded, but what we see is a mix. In fact, there are no pure Indo-Europeans today, I would think, or likely very few pure inheritors of that genetic pool. They would have to have been very isolated, maybe some tribe in the mountains of Central Asia or Afghanistan or in some Slavic country, or maybe even the Khotans or something like that, but I wouldn't think so that. I think that they're more Asiaticized, but I think that Khotans of Mongolia. But I think that regardless, like if we look around the world today, if we look at South Asia, Central Asia, and Middle East and Europe, you can see the varying degrees to which Indo-Europeans contributed to different countries, and you can sort of hash that out genetically speaking by looking for markers that you can reasonably associate with Indo-Europeans and that are found in the remains of dead Indo-Europeans. Like there's the famous R1A paternal lineage, but that is. First of all, that's only taking Y-DNA into account, which makes sense in a way because male lineages are the ones that are often passed down in times of conquest. So looking at Y-DNA is fairly reasonable, but Y-DNA only presents a small portion of the picture. Oftentimes there are other components that may also be, let's say, derived from the Central Asian steppe or southern Russia region, wherever the Indo-Europeans were thought to have originated. So this has been going on for about 40 minutes now. Hopefully the sound quality is all right. Let me know what you're thinking of this format. Ideally, I will be going to a less bad format soon, because this is really kind of uncomfortable for me. I'd much rather be in Google Hangouts on Air. Unfortunately, that I can't launch one of those from mobile. Someone says, the sound is awful. Can you sort out your microphone? Ataturk was an abo. The mic keeps getting hit. Keep your mic still. The mic is still. Alright, so we have people discussing haplogroups, Y-DNA haplogroups. Don't get sucked too far into that, because Y-DNA haplogroups only paint a small portion of the picture. It's useful to look into when you're thinking of... oh my god, what is that? Hello? Hi, okay, so that was just a fire alarm. Sorry about that. Fire alarm just went off. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on because I'm in my kitchen right now and I'm in full view of everything that could have possibly caught fire, and nothing caught fire. I checked my entire apartment and nothing is on fire. So anyway, moving on. Where was I? Yeah, Y-DNA. Y-DNA is not a good indicator of one's overall, or it's not a phenomenal way of figuring out someone's overall genetic composure. It's what it is useful for, however, is looking at migration and conquest patterns where men would have been the ones passing on their genetics predominantly, not women. So where can we see that? We can see that in things like Indo-European conquest or Arab conquest. Those are two good examples. Wherein, or as a matter of fact, Jewish, not conquest, but Jewish immigration into Europe in early times, and I'll go into that in a bit. But let's look at the examples of another group that exhibits this similar thing is European Americans influence upon African Americans. So in these instances, because it's easy to it's useful in looking at those situations, because you can say, okay, so what does this tell us? This tells us this male lineage thing, because we know that these groups were conquering. It's reasonable, not conquering, but sort of they were taking their women basically. They, in these instances, or converting their women, marrying their women, etc., which is exactly what Jews did when they came into Europe. The idea that the Jewish lineage was passed down maternally is actually, there was a large conversion of female Jews within Europe, and a fair amount of Sephardic Jews and a fairly large portion of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Roman European, Southern European women who were converted to Judaism, a study shows. And one can't really, I mean, that doesn't necessarily give all the picture. For instance, there are other details, like some people would dispute that what we're considering quote-unquote Southern European actually represents an ancient Levantine population, in the sense that the ancient Levant used to be genetically similar to peripheral Southern Europe in ancient times than it is now, due to things like Arabization and other immigration waves. That may very well be the case. However, from the way that it looks like to me is that it very well might be the case that if anyone's wondering if they're a Jew or anything like that, they should test their Y-DNA, or if they're a female, they should look at their
they should look at their male relative on the side that they consider to be Jewish, or either side, whatever that might be, and give them a genetic test. And if they have Levantine Y-DNA markers, they're either Jewish, or maybe you have a secret Lebanese person in your family, or something like that. I don't know, maybe you're a secret Syrian. You never know what you might find. But, yeah, also similarly... but I think that Y-DNA doesn't really paint a full picture. For that, you want to look at mtDNA, Y-DNA, and autosomal DNA. And even then, this technology has only come so far. It's only going to get better and better. Within my lifetime, this technology has really improved. So, in terms of mapping out people's ancestries and populations and regional ancestries, it's only going to get better and better and more precise and specific from here on out, especially as we gain genetic material from more, let's say, mummies or preserved bodies or things like that are remains that are found that are able to be examined genetically. So yeah, we're only going to learn more. One moment, I'm going to check the comments. Everyone's pressing F to pay respects. I'm not dead. It was just the fire alarm. Someone said, I've seen a few Egyptian girls that looked remarkably Northern European. They had freckles and off-red hair, but still a bit sallow. Sallow. Oof. But here's the thing. Though when someone says, "Oh, it looks Northern European," those traits in lesser quantities and with slight variations, traits of quote unquote lightness exist a lot in the Middle East. Like you find a lot of people in the Middle East who have sort of like pinkish skin or green eyes, usually not blue eyes as so much as green or gray eyes, and often not so much blonde hair, but you see a lot of red hair, like darkish red hair, like dark auburn hair. For instance, my hair is dark auburn, and you'll find a fair amount of people. I mean, yeah, and then there are extreme examples like the ginger Iraqi government official, who I forget the name of, Al-Duri. I believe his name was Al-Duri. Yeah. Finland is a good one. It's 60% N haplogroup. Oh yeah, which is Central Asian or Siberian rather. But the thing about Finland, Finnish exactly. Like someone says here, Finns are only about 10 to 15%, maybe 30% maximum on a good day in some regions, with the exception of the Sami populations. Central Asian and Siberian, but in terms of their Y-DNA, it's almost 60% consisting of a Siberian marker, which probably means that there was a large male Siberian influx into that region, or male North Asian population that came to that region, but Finns have a very unique origin situation. I mean, it's fascinating. I don't know. I should probably have a Finn on to speak about it if I'm going to talk about it, but I'll butcher it. But I think Finns are very interesting. They have an interesting history. Uralic peoples in general. Finns are some of the furthest west peoples in terms of peoples who are linguistically and genetically related to them. They are the furthest west and one of the only autonomous peoples of their ethno-linguistic group. So I think that Finland's is an interesting study for that example. It would be nice to see what one of the more eastern, either Uralic or sort of I guess like N haplogroup bearing groups of people. It would be nice to see what either of those groups would look like. One of the groups from those larger groups would look like if they were granted their own land and sovereignty now, and see how they would preserve their culture and whatnot. I'm not sure how I've always wondered within the Russian Federation, or whatever it's called. I've always wondered what life is like in terms of cultural preservation and whatnot for the minorities, because what I find is that demographically speaking, they're being demographically replaced by Slavs in a lot of countries. When I look up the yearly demographics, let's say, of a lot of these Siberian regions that used to be majority indigenous and now are majority Slavic. So I don't know. It would be and it's a shame. Some languages like Ket, which I think is connected to one of the languages spoken in North America, still to this day, is dying out. as even the indigenous people that are in those lands are replacing their own language with they're speaking Slavic languages. I guess I would assume mostly Russian. So let me see. Finns need to feel the Russian lash in order to reach their potential, says Porky Longpig. Western Man says Survive the Jive has done great content on the haplogroups and general European DNA. Look into his recent stuff. I will. I haven't been on YouTube recently enough to check those out, but Survive the Jive always makes incredible content. I highly recommend anyone visit Survive the Jive's YouTube channel. I was on several streams with him, and he's incredibly erudite and very well versed in his respective fields. If it turns out I'm a secret Syrian, will the German government send me a welfare check? Possibly. Western Man says Jews that take DNA tests are perplexed at the overlap with Italians. Alright, so this is basically something that's caused by imprecision, and that's caused by people only looking at PCA plots. What happens is that Southern Italians, which are sometimes often erroneously just labeled Italians, there's a fair amount of genetic diversity within Italy, cultural diversity. There's an immense amount of cultural diversity within Italy. Of course, one could say it makes sense to consolidate them into one unified Italy. You know, that there is a historical precedent and whatnot, and I won't deny that. But there's also diversity within the nation, in the same way that there are diversities within any given nation. You know, there are the this region people and then that region people. But a lot of Southern Italians, or shall we say, a lot of people from places like Sicily and Sardinia sometimes, but predominantly I'm thinking like Sicily, because there was a expansion of European populations, and Kevin MacDonald illustrates a picture something like this. He leaves a few groups out, but one could say that the European populations are forged by three groups. They're the indigenous European hunter-gatherers of northern and northwest Europe. They're and genetically there are different genetic markers, sets of genetic markers that correspond to these groups. And so there's the indigenous European hunter-gatherers. There are the Indo-Europeans, Indo-Aryans, who come from Central Asia, Southern Russia area. Generally, most Aryans agree. And then there is the sort of Middle East. I don't know what to call them. I'll just call them Levantine farmers. All right, so the Levantine farmers, because of the Levantine farmers, and a group that originated into the Levant and spread into Europe and spread agriculture and certain agricultural and irrigation methods as they went into Europe. They were often seafaring or had seafaring capabilities to some degree, and they were predominantly a sedentary civilization. Unlike the Indo-Europeans, they were not nomadic. They were a sedentary farming civilization, and so these Levantine farmers dispersed into the Mediterranean, predominantly leaving evidence of their presence in several civilizations which are associated with them roughly, or can be fairly reasonably attributed to them or their descendants, and they also dispersed their genetic material along the region to a degree. So that's why you'll see things like, a common one, if you're looking at just Y-DNA, you can look at the J haplogroup, more specifically J2, which is it's the West Asian / Northern Maastricht DNA marker. So the one that you'll find in places like Syria, Israel, and in diaspora Jewish communities, Lebanon, and even you'll find it in some parts of Turkey, etc. You'll also find it in places like Cyprus. Then moving further west, you'll find it in places like Malta. You'll find it in places like Sicily. You'll find it in places like... Now, the presence of this marker does not mean that these Sicilians, these Maltese, etc., are not genetically altogether more similar to a European proper than to a modern day Levantine. But in fact, the interesting thing is that these, one could say, composite populations between ancient Levantines and Europeans, who descends from both ancient Levantines and Europeans. You can look at countries such as, to a degree, Malta, to a degree Sicily, and then why do Ashkenazi and some Sephardic Jews cluster genetically right next to these populations, is because Ashkenazi Jews are also similarly a hybrid population that consists of both ancient Levantines and Europeans, both ancient Southern Europeans and more recently added in modern Northern Europeans, which drags them further in the quote-unquote European direction on any given PCA plot, whatever that is on that given plot, and away from the quote-unquote West Asia or Middle East direction, which is so now that's basically right there why Ashkenazi Jews cluster with Italians on a PCA plot. And a lot of people will pull this out for trying to prove all sorts of ideological points, and really it's as simple as stop looking at just the PCA plot. You need to look at things like Y-DNA, mtDNA, and autosomal DNA, as well as archaeology. And even if you completely take history out of the picture and don't look at it with an ideological lens, merely look at the archaeological artifacts themselves and the full genetic picture, or as best that we can obtain the full genetic picture today, and that's how you find your answer. People who are perplexed by certain things in genetics, if they delve a little further, I think what people often find is that their questions seem to answer themselves. A lot of things make a lot of sense in genetics in terms of humans. Humans make sense. If from reasonable evidence you can deduce, this population migrated to this point, and thus, this happened, etc., etc. It's fairly, it makes a fair amount of sense. All right, so getting a lot of comments here. Shami Farmer Seed. Yeah. I think this is just a test stream, so it's okay. Yeah, Justin N says the 3-tier makeup is outdated. Yes, you're absolutely correct. The 3-tier makeup is completely outdated. You're 100% correct. There are far more migrations into it than that. The reason I mentioned that when I brought up the 3-tier model, as explained by Kevin McDonald, he didn't come up with it, but he's one of the people who's known for popularizing it. I had seen similar models done around the early 2000s by a few geneticists online. I'm not sure if it was Razib Khan, but I think it may have been him, and it may have been a few others who were showing images of a model like that. But even just like I was talking about earlier, the presence of populations such as the incursion of North Asians, Northeast, sort of Siberian peoples, all the way into Northeast Europe in countries like Finland, discounts that 3-tier model. It's incredibly obsolete. Also, for instance, there are Basconic markers that are unique to Basque peoples, being in very high frequencies, that have been found in the region. So there's that wave as well that you have to contend with and think about. Justin N says ancient North Eurasian. Ancient North Eurasian is Ancient North Eurasian is a very broad group. So I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, Ancient North Eurasian is that's taking things into very broad terms. Yeah. Yeah. Justin N and Western Man are arguing in the comment section, or not arguing. They're having an interesting discussion about the about whether the three-tier system is reasonable or not, and it's just interesting. I'm taking a look at it. I think that, calling it obsolete, the more we know about genetics, the more information we'll gain, and thus the easier it will be to, let's say, pick apart something like that. I mean, but in the world of genetics, there are always going to be what do you call it? Sort of people who like to split and reduce things down to as small of groups, or ideally sometimes even for them to the individual as possible. And then there are those who are always going to sort of cluster and group people as much as possible. Those populations are. It is. Yeah. Justin N, I think, puts it very well when he says it's a good template for discussion, but empirically it's not accurate. I wouldn't even say that empirically it's not accurate. I'd say that there are elements of accuracy to it. For instance, Levantine farmers. I think that's definitely a very much thing. And Indo-Europeans, to the degree that Indo-Europeans can be associated with. I'm not even going to go into this rabbit hole, but basically, what do you call it? Yeah. It's a useful system for discussion, but if you really want to take into account every single migration and group into Europe, you're going to have to be looking at a much broader picture and a lot more groups. Some of them smaller, but I think that taking all of them into account is important, and also the fact that there are multiple migratory waves. They're from certain regions into Europe, so. Yeah, but I think that in the context, in the context of the Levantines, that I was bringing it up in the context of Levantine influence in Europe, genetically speaking, ancient Levantine influence. I think that in that context, it's fairly sensible to use, because that's one of the most sturdy components of that thesis, is the what's it called? You know who I would love to have on my podcast is Awale Abdi. He's a Somali geneticist who is very, I think he's very erudite in the areas of sort of examining sort of group populations and seeing what groups they descend from. He posts a lot of work on ancient North Eurasians, basal Eurasians, etc. He's been posting a lot of work along those lines recently on his website that I've seen, or not recently, but like within the past 5 months or so. And so he has some very good papers out that are really sort of detailing and breaking down for the layman a lot of the sort of the cutting edge of what makes different populations in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and I think it's very interesting. And I recommend that everyone go check out his website, which is, I'm not sure if this is his current website. I follow him on Google Plus, but his current website is called. His current website is called. That's a very funny comment, Western man. You look at me. I am the geneticist now. His current website is called Anthromadness, but that's not his current. That's his old website, possibly. But he has a lot of good stuff on Anthromadness. If you want to get into his work, I recommend you check out Anthromadness. They're a good resource, and I think that he breaks down and makes sense of a lot of things that someone who doesn't really have that firm of grasp on genetics will really appreciate. So I recommend you go check it out. Anyway, I'd like to. Films and Film says, I'd like to know your current opinion on the split between Israeli Jews and American Jews. And I have a lot to say about that, as a matter of fact. And as well, how we might encourage an American Jew to abandon diaspora thinking and reintroduce them to a Hebraic identity. That is a brilliant question, because that is indeed what I want to do. Before I answer that question, I'm going to run and grab myself a refill of water, because my water jug is almost empty. And it's important to stay hydrated. Everyone in the audience should also drink some water as well if they're not drinking right now. That sounds like I meant drinking alcohol. No, just drink water. It's very healthy. Alcohol, even a small amount, drinking it each day will Although there are benefits of red wine, drinking even a small amount of alcohol each day before bedtime will do terrible things to your body, as a matter of fact. Alright, hello, I'm back. So, the question I was answering was... I'd like to know your opinion on the current split between Israeli Jews and American Jews, and as well how we might encourage the American Jew to abandon diaspora thinking and reintroduce them to a Hebraic identity. It says films and film. Alright, so I'm going to give you my... First I'm going to start off with... Alright, so my critique of the diaspora Jew and my critique of the Israeli Jew. Okay, so... Okay, so I'm going to answer the first part of the question first. My opinion on the current split between Israeli Jews and American Jews. So where Israeli Jews are right now, here's where I would say they are. Israeli Jews are... To a degree, Israeli Jews are in a bubble. Yes, a lot of them speak English, and they have a relatively high English-speaking population for an Asian country, or also for a Middle Eastern country. Their English-speaking population is relatively high. However, a lot of them, they stay in a Hebrew bubble, both in terms of thought and their sort of philosophical and political and metapolitical and more, not necessarily spiritual, but in all those forms of thought that I mentioned. They are confined to, I guess, a certain space with certain parameters, more or less. They very much have their Overton window. They have their bubble. They have their things that they're talking about. For instance, you don't come into contact with very many Israelis on the internet. From my experience, you don't come into contact with a whole lot of Middle Easterners on the internet. Usually, countries that are and that's because a lot of them are on Hebrew and Arabic forums and websites, or speaking in Hebrew and Arabic on the internet. They're not speaking English because that's not their go-to language to speak in. A lot of Israelis are not very eloquent in English, and I mean I'm one to talk. I'm not very eloquent in Hebrew, but a lot of Israelis are they're sort of cut off, and they don't have a good sense necessarily of the way they're perceived by the rest of the world in a lot of instances, or they have an exaggerated or caricatured sense, or they only see certain things deliberately because they wish to see certain things in terms of how they're perceived by the outside world, and also in terms of Israeli culture. I find that Israeli culture is naturally gravitating towards I forget who it was, but one of the quote-unquote founding fathers of Israel. What a nonsensical concept. To me, I think that's a preposterous concept. There are no founding fathers of Israel. No individual should be taking pride really, or a large amount of pride at the reconstitution of Israel. It's a perennial concept that and that individual is subsuming themselves to something larger when they reinvoke Jewish sovereignty effectively. I think that the founders of one of the founders of Israel said something like, we need to have a de-Levantization process, or we need to prevent the Levantization of Israel. So knowing full well that with a population that consisted of basically Levantines and part Levantines, their general behavior, and even though and due to the Mizrahi and Sephardic cultures, as well as some of, shall we say, I guess, the Levantine remnants within Ashkenazi culture, he assumed that basically Israel would turn. I think that his picture in mind was that Israel would turn into a giant souk, but at the same time, so basically he tried to Ashkenazify, him and many other Israeli early officials tried to Ashkenazify everything. I feel like that has been in effect, but it is less increasingly the thing. I feel like Ashkenazi Jews are mixing with Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews increasingly, and so the next Israeli, the next generation of Israelis is very likely to be kind of a lot more like me, in the sense of me being like 3/4. They'll be like, for instance, they'll be like 3/4 Mizrahi, 1/4 Ashkenazi, or half Ashkenazi, half Mizrahi, half Sephardic, whatever. That was a comma there. I'm not talking about one person with three halves, but you see what I'm saying. It's that's where the next generation of Israelis is going to be. The next generation of Israelis is also, I feel like, is going to gravitate. I feel like the culture just sort of inherently became more Mediterranean, more Levantine, just sort of naturally, by virtue of the fact of Jews being in sort of their natural Levantine environment. It just sort of is what ended up happening. People eat, just stuff like I don't know, like sabich and hummus and stuff like that. And it's funny when people are like, oh, it's like, oh, the Arabs stole hummus. Someone could oh, so, no, not the Arabs stole hummus, like the Jews stole hummus from the Arabs. Like that's ludicrous, because like, did the Assyrians steal hummus? Like, I don't know, like, it's just silly. And like, if you trace it back to its origin, it just comes from where does it ultimately come from? It comes from you'll probably find that the first recorded instance of people using sesame seeds is going to be like some native Mesopotamians or something like that. But the reason why I feel like Israel is becoming more... Israelis don't know themselves a lot of times. They don't know themselves, and they don't understand or know or care to know their own history. I think that there is a detached, leftist, Ashkenazi elite that is becoming more urban, secular elite, that is becoming detached and increasingly... and it has a lot of media and a fair amount of political influence, and also generally clustered around Tel Aviv. I think that there's a group like that, and this is... I've only been to Israel several times in my life. Lived there for only... I haven't lived there for periods of longer than a year, but I think that the presence... There is very much a... there has always been an Ashkenazi elite, a secular, liberal, leftist Ashkenazi sort of elite, urbanite Ashkenazi elite within Israel, around Tel Aviv especially, and I think that this group is becoming increasingly detached from a lot of the main Israeli populace in a lot of ways, and increasingly sort of in their own bubble. I think that Israelis are becoming more... The thing is, though, Israelis don't know themselves. I say Israelis are becoming more Levantine again, or Jews are becoming more Levantine once again. They're returning to their Shami roots, sort of viscerally, in the same way that, like, one could say, like, Trump is viscerally, like, pro-Western or whatever, but it's not a conscious thing. They aren't thinking about it. In fact, many Jews, when you ask them why are Jews in Israel, they'll say, like, they won't say, we are in Israel because our ancestors come from this land. This is the land of our ancestors. This is the land that our kingdoms built. This is the land that our ancestors built their kingdoms on, etc. I feel as if when you ask them, they'll give an answer that, it is some sort of lackluster answer, like either this is the land that was given to us by God, or God gave us this land, or whatnot. And it's like, theologically speaking, regardless of whether you believe that as true or not, that doesn't. I mean, it's interesting. It's just such a different world when people make that reply. It's like your brain is in a completely different place than mine. I guess maybe that's just my Western brainwashing or whatever, that I'm not full on, like, having that, I guess, like, semi theological, like, declaration of sovereignty in my mind. But I think that, and then the other Jews will be like, oh, the reason we're here is because my family was fleeing the Holocaust or fleeing the Farhud, and Israel was established, so it was a place for all Jews to go from all around the world. It's like, no. Like, and the funny thing is, the Jews knew themselves quite recently. Jews knew themselves. Like, for instance, if you look at the letter to, I believe, Oliver Cromwell, from a prominent Jew at the time. This was a Jew in Europe, an Ashkenazi Jew, and he spoke of Mizrahi, Sephardic, and Ashkenazi Jews. He spoke of them and differentiated between them. He spoke of Jews all over the world, and then explained the origin of the Jews was Israel, Judea, the Levant, and that they intended to go back, ultimately. Within that letter, he spoke of it as if it was in the far future. I believe the author was Manasseh ben Israel. However, I could be incorrect. Manasseh ben Israel, but it's a very interesting letter. Look up a letter from a Jewish author, to Jewish representative, something like that, to Oliver Cromwell, and he's speaking on behalf of the Jews at that time, because that's what people did. Like, small ethnicities in Europe, they would have representatives speak for them to political officials, and he was, of course, I think this was unproductive, but he was petitioning for England to let Jews in. I'm sure that ended very well. I'm sure the English people are terribly grateful terribly grateful to Manasseh ben Israel. But at the same time, even then, even as a Jew who wanted Jews to live in the West, he ultimately desired and knew where his ancestral home was, and knew that he wanted to return there someday, and that he and all other Jews came from there and descend from a group of people from there, and that they wished to return. And this was, I believe, this was over 100 years ago. So, but I feel like this was over 200 years ago. But this sense of identity has been completely lost amongst Jews, even though there is this sort of, I guess one could say, all the goods and bads of a generic Levantine or Mediterranean or East Mediterranean sort of culture that are returning to Israel. For instance, that are returning to Israel and returning to the Israeli Jews. I mean, I feel like a lot of people went into Israel hoping for the creation of the new Jew, quote unquote, but instead they got the old Jew, which is the Levantine Jew. And I think that was unavoidable, and it's for the better. And I think that ultimately, like, if you listen to a lot of the music from Israel now, when I was in Israel, I was listening to the radio, and a lot of it was either Mizrahit, or it was, I don't know what to call it, sort of music that's reminiscent of the music that would be or would have been produced by Mizrahi or Sephardic Jews, as opposed to music that's created aping a Western style that Jews originally did not make music in. But the funny thing is, though, even if you look at Ashkenazi music, you can see elements of Ottoman more broadly, but also you can hear sort of one could say West Asian and Semitic components to the way their music sounds. I mean, I'm not sure what a Semitic component would be, but broadly sort of West Asian vibes are accrued from, let's say, klezmer music, for instance, or I don't know. It's interesting it's interesting to look at Ashkenazi culture for me, and look at and see elements of it that are present also in other strands of Jewish culture like Mizrahi and whatnot, but see how much they've changed after being exposed to Europe. So that's the state of Israeli Jews, from what I see. The Israeli Jews are, Israeli Jews, they do not truly know themselves, and they're in a bit of a Hebrew bubble. Politically, but I think in terms of where they're at politically, in terms of like the underlying impetus of the Israeli populace, and in terms of where they're at in terms of identity, they can't quite articulate it, but I think in a lot of ways they're going in the right direction. In a lot of ways, not all. I would worry about the usual things, consumerism, loss of connection to identity, and someone says, isn't klezmer very similar to Balkan music in general? Yes, for the most part, yes, it is. And that's in the sense that it has a lot of. It's different. It's different. It's actually different. There are elements of difference, but I'm not the one to tell you. I would have to look into it more. I find music very interesting, and I used to be in a chorus for about 9 years, but I would have to do more research into it before I answer that question, or otherwise I would answer from a place of ignorance, and I wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, Israeli Jews, though, like I was saying, they're I guess they're relevantizing to a degree, but I don't think they know themselves. They're in the Hebrew language bubble. Learning English would do them a lot of good. They when they see foreign politics, they see a very sensationalized view of it that gives them an inaccurate and distorted perception of the world. And the large Hebrew language media outlets do not help this. They fuck shit up, as a matter of fact. They make it a lot worse for the average Israeli citizen. Pardon my language. So anyway, looking at diaspora Jews, American Jews, I think that the average American Jew is increasingly secularizing. Mixing with Europeans and East Asians. They've fully Ashkenazim they got what they wanted in America, to be white. They're living the dream. They are now white, I guess, in all senses except maybe 10 to 30% of their genetic material, like the religion, to the degree that they still practice it, and the fact that they sort of I don't know, it's really, they pretty much attained their consciousness, I guess, an underlying part of their consciousness. They're white in the senses of, in all senses except a small amount of their genetic material, the religion to the degree that they practice it, because Yiddish culture and Yiddishkeit is so far removed from what would be considered Hebrew, I would think, in a lot of ways. And then this base sense of consciousness that they have, where they feel as if they are different, they feel as if they are the other from the Europeans. I find as if it's not a positive identity. In a lot of cases, it's a negative identity. It's not an identity based upon where one comes from. It's an identity based upon who one's adversaries are. It's not an identity based upon pride in yourself. It's an identity based on it's cliche to say, but victimhood and more dark, and underlying that, you could say building resentment and malice, and perhaps even a desire for revenge, a desire for retribution. But I think that's never explicitly voiced or even explored. But I feel like there are tropes of such that often commonly occur, and I feel like, but at the same time, I also feel like there's a lot of I think a lot of young Jewish guys who are going through the typical young white guy in America experience of feeling disenfranchised. White people are evil, and then they have that and the quote-unquote anti-Zionism that's going on at universities, and they'll be like, hey, people don't like Jews, in the same way that people will come to the realization, But at the same time, Jews have a lot of that plausible, hey, I'm a POC too, or at least, we're oppressed because of our religion narrative to go. So they're not quite as far as Europeans are. And at the same time, that's only a small portion of Jews, and that's mostly a lot of Jewish guys who are, a few Jewish women, a lot of Jewish guys who are younger. But really, ultimately, a lot of the older Jews in America are very much set in their leftist ways. Yeah, they and maybe at most quote unquote right wing, they'll be Jon Stewart, where he's like, oh yeah, I'll speak up to defend Israel, but I'm pretty much a leftist liberal in 99% of the stuff, except I'll speak up against, oh look, she, like, I'll point out like, oh, a crazy SJW. I'll point out like the extreme radicals of feminism, shall we say, or the extreme radical elements of what have you, but they never really fundamentally question anything, and they come from a very bourgeois place of complacency, and I think that the fact that a lot of American Jews are upper class to upper middle class, not even middle class that often, really very compared to the average American, economically speaking, it enables this. Enables Jews to have the American Jews to have this view of complacency. I think that American Jews are, though, I won't rehash all the things that I hate about diaspora, but I think that obviously, yes, compare an American Jew and an Israeli Jew, and physically the difference will become apparent. The American Jew will oft look, pale, sickly, emaciated, and sorry, one moment. Pale, sickly, emaciated, and physically different from the Israeli Jew, who will look sturdy and healthy and have broad shoulders and be presenting vigor and life, whereas the American Jew will be sallow and I don't know, just sort of like, look at Mark Zuckerberg, look at all of them, or either that, or they'll be sort of like a Harvey Weinstein, Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen type, like kind of like tubby nebbish type, and I really and either way, I think that the difference is so apparent, and you see it in how and it's obvious that they're socialized very differently as well, how they carry themselves, posture, things like that. I noticed that there's just large differences, and I'm talking here about Jews, non-Orthodox Jews even. I'm talking about the average Jew, any given average Jew, all the range from Orthodox to non-Orthodox, comparing the Israeli to the non-Israeli Jew, just physically. So yeah, I think the diaspora has many adverse effects. However, what I find is that American Jews are becoming increasingly more robust, but not in the way you would think. It's that a lot of Jews are mixing with Northern Europeans, or Europeans more broadly, or sometimes, and then of course, a lot of East Asians as well, and then like in smaller instances like Africans or American Indians, etc., etc. But largely, I think a lot of Europeans, a lot of Jewish European couples, and where it's a Jewish girl and a European guy, or a European guy and a Jewish lady, Jewish girl, whatever, I don't know, like and it just sort of. It's interesting because like in this way, because of this bolstering of European influence, the second administration of European influence from the mostly Northwest European or Northern European Americans, who are Americans of European descent, who are like very like fairly like large and healthy and strong people, like broad shoulders, tall, etc. Jawlines, prominent jawlines, etc. For this reason, I feel like a lot of those who are today identify as Ashkenazi Jews, who are often like half or a quarter or a third Ashkenazi, which means they're even less than that Levantine, genetically speaking. These people are to some degree the new generation of Jews. So they're very much assimilating, and the one thing that doesn't seem to go away is the identity, but not in a positive sense. This identity in a negative sense. This shadow identity that where they know about their oppressions and they know about their everything bad that happened to it. And I think to a degree even that is fading. Things like the Holocaust don't even have as much hold with young Jews, and I think for that reason they're just increasingly becoming desensitized to anything Jewish, etc. They'll identify that term with themselves, but they'll be like, oh, like I'm part Jewish, or just like someone's like, oh, I'm part this, I'm part that, I'm part Haitian, I'm part, Polish, I'm part Slovakian, whatever one given American may be. It's just become something like that, I feel like. And so that's the fate of the American Jews. Some of them do exist, some of them don't. And then, of course, there are the Orthodox Jews in Israel and America. All the Jews who are Orthodox, ranging from modern Orthodox to ultra-Orthodox, Hasidim, Haredim, all, the more pious Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews in the West in Israel, they don't have any risk of any sort of assimilation or anything like that, really. I mean, maybe technology is playing some role on it. Perhaps it would be better. I have an actual Orthodox Jewish friend I know. He's an Iranian. Yeah, he's an Iranian Orthodox Jew, and I could he's a friend of mine. We've gotten tea and whatnot. I don't know, hung out several times, had Shabbat together, and I could have him on the podcast, and he can discuss the differences in the Orthodox world. But I'm primarily speaking of the world of secular Reform and conservative and modern Orthodox, but less so Jews, when I'm comparing Israelis to Americans. So yeah, that's a very long-winded answer to the question that someone asked, and to the question that who asked it? Reactionary Jew. Reactionary Jew. That's the gentleman who's the Orthodox Jew, who's the friend of mine. Reactionary Jew, he goes by. Now. He goes by Reactionary Jew. Complains that now and then about the Ashkenazi. Yeah, about the Ashkenazim. Yeah, he does. I mean, he's Mizrahi. And says they have the libshit altruism side to them. Yeah, they do. Exactly. That's why it's a calamity that they control there's a Ashkenazi stranglehold, I feel, on both the left and the right politically in Israel to a degree. Because even everything is... Israel is restricted to basically... what is considered in the West often extreme far-right politics by current Western standards, but in the Middle East, they're compared to the politics of the Middle East and the politics of the East more broadly. Israel's approach to politics is it's a handicap that Israel places upon herself because of these cucked Ashkenazi leaders that wish to present as Western. I mean, I think it would be better for Israel to lose all these Western nations as an ally, and reform and renegotiate old trade agreements and whatnot, and gain a new relationship, because it's Israel's desire to appeal to these Western countries, these Ashkenazi Jews' desire to appeal to these Western countries, this failed desire to appeal to them and prove that they are the most Western liberal democratic state in the region, that they won't take a lot of the necessary actions that they need to take, and still put on the facade of being the country that they are, because first of all, this is something I despise for several reasons, because I hate pandering. I don't like pandering to other countries. I don't like pandering to the West. No one should have to pander, and no one should have to negate their own culture in order to do such a thing. I don't like the fact that Americans are being suckered out of their tax dollars and it being basically given to Israel as a what's it called? By these like neocons, Ziocon type people in the American government and in the Israeli government, in all these charities and all these groups, these lobbying groups and whatnot. I think it's bad in so many ways, and it worsens relationships, and it's not something, and it's parasitic, which is bad. As Kahana said, it's bad for Israel. It's bad for Israel because it's parasitic towards a parasite if a creature develops to be parasitic, that creature eventually, you'll look at it, becomes more and more weaker, larva-like, less capable of defending itself, because it if you look at for instance, if you look at anglerfish, a male anglerfish, they have a parasitic breeding method. The male anglerfish chomps onto the female anglerfish, bites a hold of her, and his organs degenerate. His eyes and body and fins and everything degenerate in a short amount of time. He becomes nothing but a sperm sac for the female to use to create offspring. That is the fate of a parasitic creature. You become nothing but the necessary organs that you need to be alive and kept alive, and in exchange for that, you're granted survival and safety, and you won't have to make it on your own. But for that reason, I think that hello. Yeah, for that reason, I think that Israel, you could say Jewish communities and Jews individually in their role in being diaspora people who are in the lands of another. You could say that in itself is parasitic. But now, even in our own land, Israel has taken on the role of being the parasitic state, because thanks primarily to these American Jewish and American Jewish aligned politicians in America, and in the West more broadly. These people are, the idea of Israel was for Jews to become self-sufficient. The idea of Israel was for Jews to do their, think about it, the notion of the kibbutz, the farm, self-sufficiency, being able to grow your own food, the aquifers, being able to, making the desert bloom, being able to grow your own plants, your own resources, your own water, the natural gas deposits, and the big fuss that's being made over them, because what does it mean? It means that Israel can be economically that much more dependent and self-sufficient. But that's all negated when you have the aid coming into Israel from America. And it's negated in that sense, like economically speaking, to a smaller degree than it is sort of philosophically, as is spiritually speaking, metapolitically. It's just wrong. It's not right. So I think that for that reason, I think that Israel definitely should, if not. Completely change its relationship with the West and other countries, but it won't, because of this Ashkenazi elite that I spoke of, and that I'm currently speaking of to you. They have their strong connection to the West, and a lot of them are dual citizens. Then again, I'm one to talk, but I mean, yeah, they're dual citizens, and they travel back and forth between New York City and Tel Aviv, and L.A. and Tel Aviv, and they. All the stereotypes are pretty much true. This is very much a real type of person, and these people are going to be the reason that Jews will be incapable of having a bad relationship with the West. They will exacerbate. You could say that the presence of Jews writ large, in the West itself, it will exacerbate tensions and make it impossible for Jews and the West to maintain a relationship, and that's fair as well. But like specifically, these types of people are going to be the prime instigators of conflict between Jews and the West, in the coming years, as they have been in the past. Hold on. Chris Hugo says, so where do I fit into that picture? I'm not sure what picture he's talking about. It's quite windy outside. I'm just reading the comments. Quid Veritas says, I think the alt-right and reactionaries are pretty much completely estranged. Yeah. He says the alt-right is white nationalist liberalism. With a bunch of 1488 orbiters. It's a bit harsh, Quid. I think that belief in hierarchy is important and is a distinguishing factor. The reactionaries were correct to retreat from the alt-right and their ever-increasing populism. Now is the time for reactionaries to rebuild, says Tommy. Yeah, perhaps that's the case. At the same time, though, I think that there is... even as someone who isn't a Westerner, I would say that it's wrong to say that the quote-unquote alt-right is devoid of merit, and that there is no overlap between reactionaries in the West and the alt-right as it is known. To some degree, I think there are crossovers. Although those crossovers are all on very base and material things, such as, let's say, someone like Jared Taylor explaining genetic differences and crime statistics. That information would be useful to both someone who is on the alt-right and someone who's reactionary, and someone like me, and someone also who I don't know, it could be any sort of person. There's an excellent channel that I highly recommend everyone go check out called From Nothing. Go look at From Nothing. It's the most sort of brilliant and productive channel that I have seen from an African descended African American YouTuber. Black Guy in America. Good video. Really good videos. Really, really good videos. His name is From Nothing. Basically what he does, he's made some excellent videos. He's made videos such as Top 5 Reasons Why Afrocentric People Are Toxic from a black perspective, wherein he discusses things like the fixation on and the preposterous fetishization of Egypt by a lot of the sort of black American Kang types. It's Egypt and also East Africa, Ethiopia and whatnot. And I think that's good. I support anyone who says let's clear up the misconceptions and let's get to know ourselves and get to know our own identity. And in this channel, he talks about, he covers all the stuff that you'd expect him to cover, like Mansa Musa, and wealthiest man. He just had a lot of resources. That's not anything too particular. But he talks about Benin and Timbuktu, and I think that's fairly interesting. And that's something that if Black Americans are going to be all nationalistic and whatnot, they should at least know their history and be talking about their own history rather than someone else's. So that channel is From Nothing. I highly recommend you go check it out. Obviously, he's going to be biased in his perspective in the same way that I am biased in my perspective, but I just think that his channel is very similar to mine, except mine is coming from a Middle Eastern, specifically a Jewish, a Hebrew perspective, whereas his is coming from an African perspective, specifically a West African and an African American diaspora perspective. My video is also coming from a perspective of someone who's diaspora and wishes for my people to get to know themselves more. And his video has the exact same goal. So his videos have the exact same goal. So From Nothing, again, highly recommend it. If there are any West African American descended people who are listening, which is not likely, to be perfectly honest. I feel like a lot of my viewers are... I don't know what a lot of my viewers are. Maybe I'll take a census someday. I feel like... I know there are a few black guys who follow me in America, but yeah. I'm a Jewish Hotep. Someone's asking me if I'm a Jewish Hotep. I'm not quite sure about the term Hotep. I don't like the term Hotep because, again, it implies Egypt. But, which is basically defeating the entire purpose of being proud of your own culture when you start fixating on someone else's culture. You've just switched it from Western culture to Afro-Asiatic, Semitic, and Cushitic, and whatnot culture. And it's like, okay, cool. It's still not your own culture that you're being true to. But yeah, I guess I'm a Jewish Hotep. Sure. I'm not sure if there's a name for someone like me. I just call myself a Jewish repatriationist, a Hebrew repatriationist. Hebrew repatriationist. Someone said they often reject the divine. Are you talking about Hoteps? That Hoteps reject the divine? Oh, you're talking about alt-right. Yeah. I would agree they do often reject the divine, and that can be good, but at the same time, that's to be expected. Most of every person today rejects the divine. I would say that, that's not necessarily the case. I think a lot of the Goy neocons do not reject the divine. However, I think they have an interpretation of the divine that is rather metaphysically disoriented. Enoch reluctantly rejects religion. He is not proud of it, and his personal well was poisoned by a uniquely horrible experience within the Episcopalian Church. Well, from what I hear, the Episcopalian Church is the Anglican Church's manifestation in the New World in America, and thus is quite similar to where the Anglican Church is right now. Has kind of morally degenerated to a degree, in a large part, and has lost way in terms of its traditions and in terms of maintaining coherent metaphysics. So perhaps it's just the problem is with the Episcopal Church. If I was Mike Enoch, maybe I would go try a different church. I don't know. I know his family is Slavic, South Slavic, I believe. So perhaps it would be productive for him to go to an Orthodox church, a South Slavic Orthodox church even. Maybe he would feel more in touch if he went there, as opposed to an Episcopalian church in the New World. What do I think of based antinatalism? Antinatalism. I miss Simon. I'm not sure if I know how to get in touch with him right now because of Skype, but yeah, I'll message Simon sometime. He can come back on and discuss anti-natalism and shill for the redcoats. Someone said, I think, Radel Grebdron says, I think many are disillusioned with religion on the alt-right. And I would say this, I don't think they're disillusioned with religion. They're disillusioned with the religious institutions of the modern age. And they can't necessarily distinguish between religion and spirituality and anything that's not materialism writ large as a concept, often, in some instances. They can't distinguish between that and the institutions themselves that act as or claim to be the purveyors of the divine in this realm. Institutions such as the modern Catholic Church, institutions such as a lot of modern Protestant churches in America, institutions such as in my case, a lot of temples, a lot of what's it called, Jewish temples and synagogues that are very, very extreme. I mean, it's like female rabbi, reform synagogue. They talk about social justice and how gay people are awesome the entire time. Like a lot of synagogues and churches in New York City, as a matter of fact, literally have rainbow flags plastered all over them, like rainbow flags. Every single, and even out here as well in California, in the Bay Area, a lot of churches have rainbow flags plastered over them. Gaudy rainbow flags, or even in the church, or even in the sign for the church, and I just think it's bizarre. Maybe this is a Christian phenomenon that I'm not aware of, but considering a lot of synagogues have them too, I would think that this is merely a sign for homosexual advocacy. But let me see. I think that what was I saying? Yeah. A lot of people can't tell the difference between can't tell the difference between religion itself and the church you're attending at that given moment. It's like, don't write off religion like that. Don't write off spirituality like that. Don't write off what isn't the material like that. 'Tis foolish. Yeah. Someone asked, who is Simon? Simon Elliott is an anti-natalist. He wrote one article on therightstuff.biz and then got banned from their server for spamming antinatalism, and then he came to discuss antinatalism with me and a few others. I believe I had him on my podcast to have a discussion with a bit of a debate, a discussion with the tone of a debate, but not a structured debate, on antinatalism with a few of my other channel contributors and a few viewers of my channel, as well as another channel, Oozaloo. You might know him, or possibly not. I feel like there's not a very large audience overlap, but yeah. He has like a few thousand subscribers now, so dude's doing well for himself. Western Man, have you listened to any of Andrew Joyce's work on the Jewish question? Yes, I've listened to some of his podcasts. He is every bit as erudite as MacDonald, but advocates absolute separation. You would find him interesting. And I say to you, Western Man, I have listened to his works, and I think that he is I think that his diagnosis, by and large, is completely accurate. I think that I come to a lot of the same conclusions that he does, but I also think that MacDonald does as well. I don't believe that MacDonald ever advocated assimilation. One would assume that logically, by looking at MacDonald's work, that he does advocate separation as well. If there's something else that I'm missing out on, then clue me in. But I've seen MacDonald advocate for repatriation and, in that sense, Zionism in those ways. I think that when a lot of these right-wing people rail against Zionism, as it were, they're talking about not Zionism itself. They're not angry about the fact that there is an autonomous Jewish polity in the region, that there were autonomous Jewish polities, thousands of years ago. They're not upset about the fact of that. They're upset about the fact that America and the West are made to sometimes foot the bill and sometimes suffer the political and economic repercussions for doing so, as well as have their policies manipulated. Really, the problem is the neocons, the neo-Cohens, the Ziocons, the people in America, and the prominent Jews in America who have wormed and the West more broadly, who have wormed their way into the political sphere and have wielded immense control and power, mostly due to the money and donations they receive from wealthy Jews, predominantly in the West, but some in Israel. Yeah. So yeah, that's to answer your question, Western man. Yeah, Andrew Joyce is quite nice. I'd love to have him on my podcast. Quite nice. No, he's a smart man. He's smart. Yeah. I like him a lot. McDonald is not. Yeah, McDonald is not very eloquent. I mean, I'm one to talk. I'm not very eloquent myself, but and I stammer and stutter a lot when I'm live streaming. But McDonald is. I was a bit disappointed to hear his podcast. I much prefer his written work because whenever I hear him speak, he's sort of. I don't know. There's something he does. He just doesn't have a very charismatic and listenable way of speaking. It's hard for me. I much prefer McDonald in written word. Culture of Critique. Go check it out. Culture of Critique, Kevin McDonald. Buy it on Amazon. Yeah, Joyce would be great on the podcast. I would love to have Joyce on my podcast. He was on Luke Ford's podcast. Someone is saying. Yeah. In the thing, Luke Ford. He was on Luke Ford's podcast. Joyce would be fantastic. If someone could get in touch with Mr. Joyce for me, that would be phenomenal. If any of you have ever been in touch with Mr. Joyce or know by what means he enjoys being communicated, if one of you could go to the trouble of doing that for me, that would be phenomenal. Please do that. So, what do I think of the Temple Institute and drives to build the third temple? Should we do it? I have no idea. That's actually a very good question. Yeah, I've thought about this in the past. I can't say I really have an answer. I mean, it would certainly have immense ramifications. I'm not sure if it's meant to happen in our lifetime. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly, for what it's worth symbolically, I would certainly appreciate it. But if you look at it from a theological viewpoint, I'm not sure if it would be the correct thing to do, or if it's our place to do such a thing. What do you think? Once this stream ends, I'll be able to go back onto Discord. For some reason, it's not working right now. What do I think of Luke Ford? I don't know much about him. I've seen a few of his podcasts. They seemed fairly good. I think, is he a convert to Judaism? I think he's, an Australian convert to Judaism? Yeah. He's of European ancestry. I mean, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. I know, wait, wasn't Luke Ford, wasn't he sort of running in the same circles as sort of like Pill Eater as well as like The Truth Will Live? Like, maybe I'm wrong about this, but Pill Eater, who's Pill Eater? Who's the gentleman who Pill Eater was associated with? Yeah. Luke says, I think he wants to have his cake and eat it, identify as a Jew and yet plays footsie with the alt-right. Well, I mean, one could say that I'm doing the same thing, but I think that it makes things entirely different when, in the same way, I think that what I'm doing is much more similar to, say, a Hotep saying, it's unproductive for a European identitarian and a black and West African identitarian to get into, tiffs with each other over nothing. In the same way, I think that it's, unless, at least on the issue of separation, I think that it's nonsensical for a Jew who wishes to have separation to get into an argument with a European who wants separation, or any other group of people who want separation for that matter. But I think the Europeans have become particularly enmeshed and entangled with the West in the 21st and 20th centuries, the Jewish centuries, in a way that is quite unique, problematic, shall we say. Yeah. Pillator. The Jew has I think the Jew has to abandon any claim to the spiritual by rejecting Christ. See, that's something that Adam Wallace was like, oh, something, reject logos. Like, I don't really fully quite understand the whole rejecting Christ thing, just because I don't know enough about Jesus or Christianity in the first place. Did Jesus Christ... I mean, I don't know. I should read the New Testament, quite frankly. I see the appeal of Christianity, that's for sure. I think that Christianity is incredibly beautiful and moving. Graceful, even, dare I say. Films and film. Are you Jewish? Films and film? I feel like all the Jewish channels that follow me, or a lot of the Jewish channels on YouTube, are old film channels. Like, it's not even funny. Like, whenever I look to find clips of like people like Jewish people speaking, like, I don't know, all ranging from Mordechai Kedar to Meir Kahana. It's always like old film and music channels. Yeah. A Talmud, a Hebrew. Yeah, I think that there's a distinction to be made between a Jew and a Hebrew. You know, a Jew to me is the whole ethno-religious package. A Hebrew to me is merely the descendants of the ancient Hebrews, those who identified as Jews or Judeans, or even before the term Jew, those who identified as Israelites. Those Hebrews. I would say Samaritans are also Hebrews, as they descend from the same ethnic group. Samaritans, however, Hebrew is merely an ethnonym as I use it. Someone said I should read the book. Read the book. What? The New Testament? Yeah, I'll check it out. As a matter of fact, I'll give it a look. It's not very easy to read, is it? I would assume, considering the Old Testament is not very easy to read in a lot of ways. Nor is the Quran very easy to read. What's my opinion on Varg and paganism? I'm not sure about Varg. I've seen a few of his videos. They seem fairly informative, a bunch of them. He did some cool videos outdoors. Nice cinematography. I don't know much about him. What's my opinion on paganism? Paganism is such a big term. Like it's such a broad term. Paganism merely is a slanderous term for an indigenous religion. What indigenous religions are we talking about? European indigenous religions? Middle Eastern indigenous religions? Or Asian indigenous religions? I'm not sure. If you narrow it down, I can answer more precisely. In terms of European indigenous religions, I think that with European indigenous religions, it would be difficult to resuscitate them. But I think that there's a lot of merit in them. But I think that also a fair amount of that merit, that European spirit, has also been transferred over to European Christianity. But at the same time, I think that they're worth exploring, they're worth finding out about. Reviving, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not a European. Vault Wright asks, what would you say to Jewish people? A term that I don't like. I prefer Jews or Hebrews. What would you say to Hebrews? What would you say to Americans of Hebrew ancestry who have become deracinated in the European/American diaspora? So Jews who have lost themselves and lost their identity in the West. Well, I think this is very interesting because Jews managed to go in the West without completely losing their identity. I mean, yes, it would change and they would lose components of it. For instance, they traded out their, their sort of kaftan or dishdasha, whatever they would, that's not what they would call it, but they traded out their that type of garment for, a European, those European black clothes at a certain point. They traded out their melas for shtetls. They wouldn't call it melas back then. They would call it something else. They traded out their little Jewish quarters, their Middle Eastern Jewish quarters, for shtetls. And they, sorry, there's a lot of traffic outside. Let me close the window. And they traded out a lot of their names for they didn't trade it out, but they added on European names to theirs. For instance, they were forced to take European names, things like Goldblum, Rosenbach, Silverstein, etc. These names were when the Europeans were doing their first censuses. The Jews didn't have last names. You see, they were following the Middle Eastern naming tradition of being named. For instance, your name would be like Yosef ben Abraham. Yosef ben Abraham. So let's say Yusuf. Yeah, it would be Yusuf bin Ibrahim, or Ibn Ibrahim for an Arab. It's the same tradition, except so that basically means that you only have one name. You have your family name, and then you have your own name. Except except the Jews, the Jews didn't have any names to add on. The Jews didn't have when they were the way the Germans were doing the census, as well as other Europeans. They needed two names. So that's when the Jews just picked random objects in nature and objects around them, and there thus was or precious minerals, metals. Thus silver stein and golden blatt and whatever, Goldblatt and Bergenthal and whatever names like that got born, or they were named after like places or something. Like Thal is Valley of, like for instance Rosenthal, Valley of the Roses, Blumenthal, Valley of Blooms, I guess, I don't know, like Blooming Valley. It's like Silverstein, a silver stone. So precious minerals, how unsurprising. But those things. So those things. So to a degree, like things were changed, yes, but by and large things stayed the same. I think the shtetl did a lot to preserve it, and Orthodoxy did a lot to preserve things as they were. However, what's changed now is a large part of it is secularism, and then leading up until that, the Enlightenment also was a very large component. So it was a kind of a 1-2 punch. It was first the Enlightenment and then secularism, and then came modernity. And after modernity, basically all Jews except the most pious, especially in the 21st century, were completely deracinated and lost themselves. So what advice can I give? Here's what advice I can give you. Go to Israel. Even if you can't afford to go to Israel, take the free birthright trip. Yes, I know it's it's a meme-worthy thing, and it is kind of meme-worthy and stupid to go on a Taglit birthright trip, and guided tours are stupid and cringy, and etc., etc., etc. And yes, it's paid for by a lot of evangelical Christian foundations who want Jews to go back to Israel for their own reasons. Yes, regardless of all of that, I recommend doing the birthright trip if you can't afford going to Israel on your own terms. If you can afford it, go to Israel on your own terms as soon as possible. Know what it is to be among your people and walk among people who share. I mean, you could say everyone shares a common ancestor with you, but no, it's something else when you're in Israel. Even if you are, genetically quite far removed, Jews generally know other Jews pretty well, even if they're mixed with Europeans to a pretty high degree. So, and there, you might have like a Western, you might be like, inculcated severely in Western culture. Find the strands of Jewishness and the Hebraic strands that still remain in your life, in your generation. Is there an old Torah, Sefer Torah? No, it wouldn't be a scroll. Do you have some like old Jewish liturgical material, old books, old yarmulke? It would probably be a yarmulke for you, I assume, because that's what Ashkenazi Jews call them, right? Yarmulke, Yarmulke. So find what little you have of that identity, and it's like finding a dead body and or a nearly dead body where the pulse has stopped, and performing defibrillation upon it. If you wish to do the easy thing, my advice to you is simply blend into American society, blend into Western European society, and completely forget about your Jewishness. It'll be more of a burden to anything than you from now on, and just be say you're like half Lebanese or something. But if you want to do the hard thing, and the thing that I think is morally correct, then I recommend you go to Israel. Go to Israel eventually. That should be your long-term goal, or at least marry a Jew and live in a Jewish community. Whether you're religious or not is a component, and whether to the degree you wish to explore Judaism is its own component. But try to get back in touch with your Hebrew identity. Look at old notes and letters from your family. Learn how to write your name in Hebrew. Look at how your family wrote their name in Hebrew, because my family has a list where they have their names written in Hebrew, and they have a few other things written in Hebrew as well. However, it's written in Arabic in Hebrew. It's the Arabic language written with Hebrew. It's the Judeo-Arabic language written in Hebrew. Hebrew writing, so I haven't been able to decipher all of that really in the way I wanted to. But a lot of Jewish families keep writings and things left over from their ancestors, religious texts and other things that they've gotten in their travels. So yeah, if you really want to resuscitate that within yourself, then go for it, do it. Although I warn you, don't just go to the local synagogue. There's nothing worse than going to a bad synagogue or a bad temple, whatever. Like, that really turned, like, seeing the fact that, like, seeing all these Reform synagogues really turned me off of Judaism for a very long period of my life, because it was like, basically, they don't preach Judaism, they preach liberalism. It's very uninspiring. It was the same thing that I was hearing at the school that I was going to, the prep school that I was attending at the same time, the same exact message. And I was just like, I don't need a second person telling me this stuff. There's nothing spiritual, there's nothing transcendent there. There's nothing transcendent. There's just, reading, rote memorization, singing songs, and liberalism. And that's very uninspiring, especially to a young man. So yeah, Volright, pass on that advice to them. One moment. I'm just reading through the comments. Quid est Veritas says... there's a lot of comments on paganism. Oh yeah, someone says, talk about Varg's brand of... Western Man says, talk about Varg's brand of paganism. Something. What's my opinion on Varg's brand of paganism? I don't know. I'm not going to talk about Varg's brand of Nordicism / Odin worship. I don't know anything about those religions. I don't know anything about indigenous European religions, really. Or at least I don't know. I mean, I do. Like, I've read, Nordic mythology growing up, and it was very tragic. Every character who was introduced in the book seemed to end up dying. But, Norse mythology. But, other than that, like, I don't know enough to have an educated opinion on the matter. So I'm not just going to blindly give my opinion, I don't know enough about Varg. I mean, Varg, ancestrally speaking, at least he is ancestrally speaking the inheritor to those paganisms that he proclaims, which is better than a lot of these pagan types that I see on the internet. It's one step closer to what would be ideal, but nonetheless, it's hard to do something like that in modern times. It's very difficult. Read the Gospels, then the book of Hebrews. I was pleasantly surprised when I read the Gospels myself. I always tried beginning with Genesis. Big mistake. Read the New Testament, then the Psalms, then Isaiah, then read it right through from Genesis. I'll take a look at it. I will take a look at it. Yep, Psalms. I'll check out Psalms as well. Alright, so I guess that's pretty good advice for getting into the Bible. The New Testament, rather. I'll have to take a look. I mean, quite honestly, the New Testament is something that I really haven't begun to even begin exploring, because I know that it would be such a massive undertaking. It is the foundational underpinning of Christianity. And is the Gospels part of the New Testament or no? Because I know sometimes it's included with it, but is it considered to be part of the is it the part of the New Testament or no? I mean, the term New Testament is very Christian-centric, isn't it? It's the idea of the New Testament. It's the implication being Old Testament. Old Testament being the Tanakh. Old Testament being obsolete, rendered thus by the New Testament.
Ever been in touch with Mr. Joyce?
Yeah. So, if anyone has any last few questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I am going to run out and grab myself a dinner, because I'm quite hungry. Is there an ice cream truck outside my house? What on earth? Yeah. It's been quite a while since I've heard an ice cream truck. It's been years, as a matter of fact. All right, so there goes an ice cream truck. All right, so if anyone has any questions or comments before I wrap this up, feel free to ask them now. Hello? All right. Hello? All right. So, oh, here, I have some questions. Someone says, stop making excuse. It brings light to the Old Testament. It's like a Rosetta Stone. I've heard the Talmud described in a similar manner. It's funny that you say that, but I'm really not making an excuse. It's really just it's not within my real cultural jurisdiction. There's no reason I would have read it up until this point, because it's first of all, it's a massive undertaking. But it's like, why haven't you read the Quran? Someone says, have you given any time to reading Plato? Yeah, I've read a bit of Plato. I've read a bit of the Republic. Not the entire Republic, though, which is actually something that this reminds me I need to do at some point or another. I've only read the first dialogue, the first set of dialogues within the Republic, which is the entire thing is on justice, but it's the first dialogue on justice that I believe he has with three other opinions voiced within the discussion alongside his, or three other dialogue participants. So that's what I've read of Plato. Not very much, and so I should I should learn more Western classics, most certainly. Someone says that remember that Talmudism will condemn you to the eternal fire. Better to be a Muslim, says Imperial Aspirations. The thing about the Talmud that I find terribly interesting is, first of all, the Talmud, how do we know, to any Jews in the audience, Orthodox Jews specifically, how do we know that the Talmud is an accurate representation of the oral law? First of all. Second of all, how do we know that the Talmud is how do we know that the I don't know, the modern Jewish establishment effectively descends from Pharisees, with the exception, one could argue, of the Karaites, I believe they're called in English, Karaites, and who are despised by a lot of mainstream Jews for rejecting the oral law. However, I think that the oral law is something that's just been set down and unquestionably enforced by the Jewish establishment for such a long period of time, as this is what it is. I think that such things could be open to renegotiation. It would be nice if someone passed down the oral law orally still, as opposed to had it written down, because then someone would be able to compare and contrast between the two. And plus, I think that a lot less weight is put on the Tanakh than the Tanakh alone than is on the Tanakh being read with the aid of the Talmud, as it were, or the Tanakh being explored through the Talmud. The Talmud is very important, and I think that My personal experience with Judaism is beginning with the Tanakh. As someone who was raised in a secular, a very light reform / ultimately secular household, I'm starting with the Tanakh, and that's how I tend to do it, as opposed to starting with the Talmud, because I could, Talmudic studies takes people an entire life, and in terms of the merit of what's in there, I've heard very mixed reviews. So, yes, there are fake Talmud quotes online, designed to make the Talmud look like some Necronomicon type situation. But there are a lot of, and yes, I don't reject the Talmud because of reactionary or ethnocentric messages that were in it. The reason why I might reject it is because it seems like, not reject it, and I wouldn't, when I say reject it, I don't mean outright reject it. I'm just saying, I have my reason, I have my suspicions. I have, and plus, I think it's odd that some seem to value the Talmud even more than the Tanakh. The Torah is the ultimate sort of thing of Judaism, correct? If I'm not mistaken, it's the OG scroll. It's not to be usurped by the Talmud. If anything, at best, the Talmud is a guide to reading it or interpreting it, or making sense of it and practically applying it in instances. The Talmud is a list of conclusions, of decisions, of using it. I mean, I don't know. I don't think that the Talmud is where a lot of my time is going to be at any point in my life. Perhaps I will study it someday, though. You never know. And when I say study, I don't mean that in the sense of in studying it whilst endorsing it, merely to look at it. It's such a influential and prolific document that's influenced so much of the world, largely, and also even more, an even higher percentage of Jewish thought, that I think it's very, and in some ways one could argue, Jewish attitudes or approach to discussion and argument that are subtly buried in our pill pool, that are subtly buried within our culture, among other things, and methods of inquiry. So I think that it's very worth checking out and looking into at some point or another, regardless of whether one believes in it or not. Even a non-Jew, I think, should, if you truly wish to get used to the Talmud, then I recommend you, if you wish to truly, discuss the Talmud, then I highly recommend you just acquaint yourself a bit more with it outside of, online Talmud quotes. I think there are a lot more. Pardon me, I just dropped my water. There's a lot more to the Talmud. It's a massive document, and I think that the more you can find out about it, the more you can sort of, understand about, I guess, elements of the Jewish philosophical psyche, or where that is right now, perhaps even more so than a lot of Jews consciously understand. Someone says in the comments, Hitler was an avatar of Vishnu. Esoteric Hitlerism. What's the difference between Platonism and esoteric Platonism? I'm not sure what esoteric Platonism is. Peter Kreeft does have some good introductory videos on Platonic ideas. I should check them out. I'm not sure what esoteric Platonism is. Is that a meme or is that an actual thing? You can just put esoteric something-ism in front of anything and it kind of becomes a meme these days. Hitler was an avatar of Hitler. Yeah. If anyone has any, any Jewish friends who are having identity struggles, pass this video on to them. This will help them out. Considering I gave that advice earlier, I know there are people like me out there. I see them in the comment sections and whatnot, but I feel like a lot of them misdirect their impulses. Like, for instance, a lot of them wish to basically just become like Western nationalists, but also Jews. I think that's ludicrous and impossible. You can't both be a Jew and a nationalist of a Western nation, and you can't both be. It's like I mean, I guess I suppose in a way you can be, but ultimately you're a Jew first. Because think about it. There were Jewish regiments that served in England that served in England in the English military, but they would have their own. They would be like the Jewish regiment, just like they would have like regiments of other groups, like Indian regiments, whatnot. But they were, it was. I believe in a lot of instances they were fielded separately, and they had their own Jewish chain of command and whatnot. And ultimately, they were fighting alongside them because they were unified for empire, or they were unified for because it's it's the group that's helped them out. It's here, you scratch my back for letting me live there, I'll scratch yours. But it's not the same as a Jew, because you can't, unless you have zero attachments to Israel. I mean, I guess then it's somewhat feasible, but you won't have zero attachments to Israel, and even if you do, your children won't. It's the whole Arab Muslim in the West phenomena. It's the exact same situation. It's Kreeft. It's not, for anyone who is interested in Platonism, it's not Peter Kreeft. It's Kreeft. Kreeft. Peter Kreeft. He has a short lecture series on Objective Bob's channel. I'm not sure who Objective Bob is, but I recommend you go check it out if you are interested in Platonism. Western Man says that I would make a great guest on Luke Ford's podcast, and that if I ever want to do that, Western Man would let me know. And I say to that, I would most certainly love to come on Luke Ford's podcast, or as a matter of fact, I'm actually open to coming on any podcast. Please, if anyone would like to have me on a podcast anytime, please let me know, and that can most definitely be arranged. I'm even most days I'm even contactable day of. You can message me during the day, and I'll get back to you that day. In fact, I would love to do another podcast later today if anyone would like to have me on their channel, but unfortunately I can't have a hangout. So if I'm going to be doing a chat with multiple people, it will need to be on their channel. Anyway, I suppose that's all for questions, and I'm probably going to be wrapping this up unless there's anything else from the audience. I will be concluding the stream in a few minutes. If I got on Millennial Woe's Christmas streams, this would be the third Christmas that Millennial Woes has had now, and this will have been the second time I will be appearing on his Christmas streams. I could do a Hanukkah stream on my channel. Someone said, take care and charge my fucking phone. Oh yeah, you must be seeing all these messages that are popping up that are telling me to charge my phone. Yeah. Someone should get Ben Shapiro to come on my show. I want Ben Shapiro to come on my show and debate me. I want to debate Ben Shapiro in person so that I can loom over him. Because I'm about 6 foot. And I know everyone on the internet is like 6 foot something. But I'm let's just say I am a good deal over 6 foot. And Ben Shapiro is a scrawny manlet. I would loom over him. He would tremble and quake before me. I'm not sure if I can quite keep up with his typewriter-like syllables per second, but I think that I could inflict a few solid blows if Ben Shapiro and I were to debate. Maybe I'm overestimating my own wit a bit here, as many Jews often do. I've noticed from my personal experiences and anecdotal just happenings in my life. But I think that I could. There's a fair chance that I could take down Ben Shapiro simply because I don't believe the facts are on his side on multiple issues. His Constitution shtick is really irritating me, and the fact that he's gained so much popularity and traction. Like, he's been doing what he's been doing for a moment now, but it just says something about our society that so many people. It's just odd. How do people find it inspiring? Like, you truly must be a very boring person if you find Ben Shapiro to be inspiring. He just makes the same old, hackneyed conservative points over and over and over again. Like, go watch Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager is far more entertaining in a lot of ways than Ben Shapiro. Dennis Prager's like older, more well-spoken. Grandfather of Ben Shapiro. Is Dennis Prager a Christian? He isn't a Jew anymore, is he? Is he a Christian now? I'm not sure. So I'm gonna answer that. Yeah, I am still streaming. I mean, I figured why not? You know, I'm relaxed. I'm having a nice glass of tea and a sip of water from my thermos on my bed. Yeah, why not? Why not keep streaming a little bit more? Steven Crowder. I mean, Steven Crowder is actually, he can be quite funny sometimes, but I think that Steven Crowder is just another one of these people that's like, these conserva bros, cool servatives, these cool servatives, and these like bro servatives, it's just like, and then there are all these female channels that cropped up, sort of, like there's so many like that. There's like Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, all these women who wore the Trump hats, like that was such a thing, and then like a few of them became like edgy. Like, isn't that how Brittany Pettibone had her origin, or am I wrong about that? Or Lauren Southern sort of followed that trajectory, one could argue. Now she's an identitarian. But what's funny is now there are all these like, I guess one could say, not reactionary, or I guess somewhat quote-unquote traditional, but really I guess you could say they're more properly aligned with the alt-right. There are all these women who are making these videos, all these young women, and like that's a big thing that's happened now. I mean, if I was a young woman, I would do that right now. I would get in on the trend, because it's just, you know, say the same talking points again and again. See, the thing is that I find about YouTube videos is you can't go making the same talking points again and again and again and again. It just gets very dull, and you can't go into YouTube and start making the talking points that everyone else is making. Like, that's the thing about the anti-SJW thing. Like, that ship has sailed. You know, I feel like people desire something edgier now, more broadly in society, one could say, and on the internet. I think that this guy desires something. Oh, I'm not sure if my mic was on then or not.
But yeah, I just posted a link in the chat. If anyone if anyone wants to host a stream themselves, I recommend they go do it. And because I'm ending this one, but I would be totally down to go on someone else's, because I can't host a Google Hangout. That's the thing. Yeah. Hold on 1 second. I don't know why that's weird. Hold on 1 sec. Oh shit. Give me one moment. Give me 1 sec. Here, hold on. Minor technical difficulties. Give me 1 sec. Here. Wait, hold on. Wait. Okay, wait. Give me 1 sec. I'll figure this out. I got this. This is the Rara Avis in the flesh, or, well, virtual. Except now he's wearing a ski mask, and it looks like he cut his eyelids off as well. You need to take in the collapse, okay? You don't just need to ride the tiger. You need to cut your eyelids off so you can be staring at the collapse at all times. That's how you know shit is really going on. Okay, so yeah, where is Nightmares now? I'd love to know. He can come join me. We can play Leaf together. Okay, so basically, here's how you start a stream on Google. Give me 1 second. The way to start a stream, Hangouts on Airstream, is you need to press Go Live Now when you're making the stream. I'll post the link in the comment section after this. And I'm gonna close the stream up after this. If anyone wants to add me on Discord, my Discord is I guess that's where I'm communicating now. My Discord, I talked about it earlier in this call. It's like ed number 7043 or something like that. All right. Well, it's been a lovely stream, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in.